Hello, I'm Adrian, and welcome to Fight Scene Breakdown. Today we're going to be taking a look at the main fight from Batman vs Superman, and just so you know, there are spoilers from the film. Let's begin. Besides a couple of punches and blocks, most of the fight is presentation fighting, for lack of a better term, where we mostly get to see them tackle or throw each other without complex fighting choreography. It begins with a simple shove from Superman, which actually works perfectly to establish the imbalance of power between the two. Even with the suit, Batman is nothing more than a flea for Superman. Batman then counters this imbalance by employing traps that do little else but anger Superman, causing him to do the mainstay of presentation fighting, performing a tackle, which in this case ends with a throw that would have definitely killed Batman had it not been for his armor. Batman then throws a small gas grenade, which is actually comprised of lead, something which according to the Batman vs Superman tech manual from the film, Superman cannot see through with his X-ray vision, causing him to quickly dash to the other side. It is here where Batman lands his first successful hit, as that kryptonite gas grenade diminishes Superman's powers immensely. He blocks Superman's punch effortlessly, and with a quick headbutt and kick, sets him up for a pound the ground kind of tackle. Superman regains his powers and counters Batman, but after a second kryptonite gas grenade, things quickly go south for Superman, ending the fight. A major component of a good fight scene is a face-off. It happens when the two fighters take a good look at one another before the actual fighting begins. You can see it in Winter Soldier, in Matrix, and in Batman vs Superman, where it actually sets up the fight really well. Since the previously described fight choreography is so minimal, the good thing is that it all makes perfect visual sense. The editing doesn't seem to get in the way at all, only cutting when the shot reaches its natural end, such as when Superman throws Batman, and then we cut to Batman crashing against the light, and then languishing in pain as Superman slowly makes his way towards him. Zack Snyder has always had a flair for framing action scenes and visually interesting compositions, and for the most part, he retains his style. It's unfortunate the fight had to take place in such a visually drab location. The Superman vs. Zod fight had much more interesting geography and camera work and was much more impactful. It is here where the fight really crumbles under its own weight. This alone could merit an entire video, but I will keep it as short as possible. For the first part of the film, we were building towards an epic confrontation where Batman wants to fight Superman because he believes he is a destructive threat to humanity, and Superman believes Batman is an overly violent vigilante. But suddenly, the entire premise is dropped because Lex Luthor decides to kidnap Superman's mom. Now the fight has shifted to that of an unwanted fight. Superman did not want to fight Batman, but was manipulated into it by Luthor, and furthermore by Batman's traps. We're therefore left with a scene where Batman seems like a bully, and Superman like a confused victim, not the epic confrontation we were promised. In conclusion, the fight was an interesting representation of how a man with no powers would exploit the one weakness of a man with all the powers in order to beat him. It was definitely not worthy of being the entire centerpiece of the film, as the skirmish was much too short and was somewhat underscored by just how forced the fight turned out to be. I actually prefer the fight scene in the animated film based on the comic The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. Today we're taking a closer look at the warehouse fight scene from the Ultimate Edition of Batman vs Superman. Batman is a master tactician, and one of the most important things in being able to actually take out a large group of people is the element of surprise. As such, instead of coming through the door as everyone in the warehouse is expecting him to, he blasts through the floor using his grappling hook and immediately disables several of the henchmen's weapons with an awesome bat gizmo. This poor sap still thinks Batman is beneath him and gets a harsh reality check when the Caped Crusader hangs him up Predator style. Batman drops from the ceiling, grabbing this guy's assault rifle and uses it as leverage to brutally break the man's arm, but instead of tossing the weapon, he fires it around the room to force his enemies to drop to the ground. He swiftly throws a man and notices another gunman about to fire at him from across the room. Lucky for Batman, the Batsuit is not only made from a technical carbon fiber tri-weave, this guy is clearly scared out of his mind and is unable to aim properly. Batman fires his grappling hook, which connects with the man's shoulder, and just like in the Arkham games, he pulls the thug towards him and clocks him with an insanely strong left hook, sending him down the hole Batman created when he entered the room. An armed henchman bursts from the door, but before dealing with him, he throws a batarang to temporarily incapacitate another. Assuming his rifle won't be effective against the superhero, he cooks a grenade, but doesn't count on Batman performing a roundhouse kick on the hanging man, sending him right towards the grenade. It detonates moments after, and now we go to the section featured in the trailer. He quickly incapacitates the guy closest to him using his grappling gun, strikes at the solar plexus of the next, and with two swift elbow strikes echoing Krav Maga's close quarters no-nonsense style, disarms and knocks out the armed henchman. Now he's going to deal with a very inexperienced man using a knife. Any knife instructor will teach you that in order to be effective with the knife, you need to keep it close to you and perform quick, swift movements that serve to extend your reach and make your strikes lethal. This guy does the complete opposite. He widely swings to the right and tries to stab Batman in the head with another giant movement. But by throwing his entire arm forward, he makes it incredibly easy for Batman to shift out of the way and gain control of his arm, culminating in an epic throw to the ground. These two guys decide to join in on the knife fight after they run out of bullets, but Batman is currently busy smashing this thug's head into the box so he can then use his grapple gun to throw it at another man, inflicting a deadly hit. One thug has had enough of the grapple gun, so after a couple of poorly aimed shots, he gets Batman to drop it, but will pay for it dearly in due time. Batman runs at the group and now must systematically eliminate each and every one. He begins by striking the man to his right in the gut, temporarily stunning him, following up with a further strike to the gut to the man on his left. As he turns back to hit the first man with a swift open palm strike to the neck, a third man strikes at him from behind with another knife. But the cowl on Batman's head is equipped with a titanium understructure, effectively causing the knife to harmlessly slide off the cowl. With this extra time, Batman strikes at two men at the same time in the head. He quickly deflects the attack from the man in front of him and rewards the knife attacker with a swift headbutt. A second attacker attempts to stab his gut, but clearly fails, and Batman takes the time to brutally side elbow the thug in front of him in the head. This particular elbow strike is actually more closely associated with Taekwondo and Karate rather than Krav Maga and Muay Thai, and sometimes a second hand is placed for added flourish. Moving on, Batman's gauntlets prove to be incredibly useful here as they easily deflect the double knife attack from opposite sides. Now he needs to disarm them. He starts out by grabbing the arm of the attacker right in front of him and quickly launches a rear elbow strike to take care of the guy behind him. With the thug's arm firmly in control, he uses his forearm to smash the man's elbow and break his arm. What comes next is a very low kick, sometimes used to block kicks in Bing Su, but which can also be lethal if enough force is used to drive the leg through, as seen here. With these two foes taken care of, he now deals with another knife attack using the same block from before, but this time redirects it to awesomely shield himself from another incoming knife. And just like good old Captain America, decides to push kick this particular guy and redirects the knife again to make this man stab himself. Now it looks like he's about to initiate a throw on this guy, but suddenly he's performing an upward elbow. More on this on the cinematography editing section coming up. Continuing with the choreography, a quick deflection and straight punch later, and this knife assailant is dealt with. One guy dares to stand behind the Dark Knight and with a ridiculously strong right hook is quickly face planted into the floor. Note how much torque is in this particular punch. The next man tries to take the fight to the floor MMA style, but his tackle is too weak and Batman easily uses his momentum to slam him to the ground and follows up with 3 furious punches to finish him off. This doofus assumes his gun will be the one to finally break through Batman's cowl, but is sadly mistaken. Once he stands up, Batman attempts to quickly disarm the man, but is met with a lot of resistance. Rerouting his attack and flipping him towards the ground, he twists in his knee, breaking the thug's arm in the process. But 2 more very relentless men are left and he is directly hit with a front kick, and the other thug wisely uses Batman's cape to drag him to the ground. Luckily, Mr. Wayne is still in fighting form, so he quickly deflects all incoming knife swipes using his gauntlets, waiting for the right opportunity to counterattack. He finds it when the thug gets too close to the ground and follows up with an excellent cross elbow strike, perhaps the most ubiquitous Muay Thai technique. But a push kick from the second man knocks him back to the ground just in time for the other guy to stab him in the shoulder. Batman knocks a push kicker off his feet and with the same free leg brings it up to the man's face, dealing a critical knee strike. He spins to block the other thug's attack and quickly pushes his leg off the ground, causing him to lose his balance. Batman is clearly not happy about being stabbed, but decides to use the impaled knife against his attacker. Notice how the man behind him is still not down for the count. He lifts the henchman off the ground, slams him to the wall, and angrily stabs his shoulder for a taste of his own medicine. The other guy comes back for seconds, but with a quick jab and knee, he takes him out again. And just to make sure he doesn't come back, throws him against the wall. And in the Ultimate Edition, Batman is still not finished with the one guy who managed to hurt him in the entire fight, and by the looks of it, makes him pay for it with his life. He breaks through the flimsy wall, shoots the flamethrower, and effectively saves Martha. This fight was set in perhaps the most picture-perfect location for an old-school action throwdown, an abandoned warehouse, and was shot exceedingly well. There are several shots where we can see entire bodies in frame and easily be able to tell what is going on, and whenever we go in close, it's usually to show off a block or a strike that we couldn't appreciate from afar. The editing is for the most part very well done, with each shot usually lasting as long as it should to show the pertinent action. But sometimes I do wish it could have held on certain shots a little longer before cutting to the insert. The shaky cam is used, but not to a nauseating effect. I hope we get less of this in future Batman scenes, as the choreography is top notch. What I brought up earlier is that in this particular section it looks like we're going to see a grab, but cut to an elbow instead. Since these 2 shots don't match up, I do believe there's still an even longer fight on someone's computer. Perhaps this move led to a whole other sequence we didn't see. It may have been this section in the trailer where a man rushes towards Batman and he flips him over, as this never happens in the final cut. Batman's costume also looks incredibly menacing in this low-key lighting. Batman needs to rescue Martha and also has a time limit in which to do so. The stakes are there and the story makes it very clear that there is no way to avoid this fight at all. Wow, what a fight, huh? Going through it move by move really makes one appreciate just how awesome and complex the choreography is, and the cinematography and editing for the most part only serves to enhance the entertainment value. Not only is it a brilliant Batman fight scene that makes use of his gadgets and skills, it is also a fantastic fight scene in general. Today we're taking a look at the nightmare fight sequence from Batman vs Superman. The fight begins as soon as Batman realizes he has been duped, and his first order of business is to get out of the small enclosure they have him in. He quickly deflects the assault rifle, holds it at bay with his left arm, kicks the fake kryptonite box, then draws his sidearm and fires at the enemy in front of him. But the guy next to him isn't down yet, so after a brief scuffle, he receives an elbow to the face and decides to go in for his absolute favorite move, the headbutt. He smacks Superman's soldier across the head with an assault rifle, pushes him out of the way, and shoots him with his sidearm. What precedes here is known as gun fu, or the cooler sounding gun kata, coined in the movie Equilibrium, where we get stylish close quarters gunplay resembling a martial arts battle. With that in mind, note how Batman swings his assault rifle as if it were a tonfa or any other martial arts staff weapon to knock one guy to the ground and sweep the next off his feet. He shoots the following man with his sidearm and tackles him to the ground. Using the rifle as a melee weapon once again, he smacks the guy behind him and uses it to also take out the two incoming men rushing towards him. He fires his pistol, then throws it to prevent the soldier from firing at him, and he then goes in for a quick disarm and control move as he decides to hold the man as a human shield while he shoots at another foe. He throws him away and tries to drag one of his allies to safety, but is overwhelmed by a flurry of hits. A very low sidekick to the soldier's leg successfully takes him down, and an elbow and melee hit takes care of the other one. A man goes in for a tackle, but applying the principle from judo of turning your enemy's strength and speed against them, he simply deflects it off of him. He shoots the men behind him and shortly afterwards brutally head slams another, but they continue to close in on him. Despite slamming one man into his knee and cracking the neck of another, he is powerless to stop the soldiers and the parademons. Once we get out of the truck, the entire scene is presented in one long sweeping take with no cuts, echoing the kind of style Zack Snyder favored in his film 300. This grand sweeping camera movement actually meshes well with the choreography, as it is meant to be incredibly showy and less brutal than the warehouse fight scene. The scene is also sepia toned, highlighting how what we're seeing is clearly not actually happening in the current timeline. The camera placement allows us to see the terribly impractical yet cool looking gun strikes, but also makes it a little more obvious on multiple viewings that several soldiers choose to rush at Batman when they could have easily fired on Batman. The speed of the performer's movements also doesn't seem as fast as the warehouse fight scene, as that is the risk you run with a long take. The performer can get tired, and the technique can sometimes not be as precise, as not everyone is a legendary Tony Jaa. Going back to the scene, although I would have much preferred to see him in his full Batman costume rather than a trench coat, I can't deny that it was a flashy sequence that was really well made. What's different about this scene is that it has its own narrative where Batman tries to find kryptonite to take out a clearly mentally unstable Superman and is overwhelmed by his forces. As such, he needs to fight his way out in order to avoid being captured and potentially killed. The scene, while initially jarring in a first viewing, does help to visualize the apocalyptic scenario that could occur if Superman were to turn against humanity, the thing Batman is so afraid of. I will note that it was a tad disheartening to see Batman murder so many people with guns, taking into account his two main rules for modern incarnations have been no guns, no killing. But in the film's defense, we are talking about a Batman who has clearly gone off the deep end due to an enraged Superman. He actually reminded me more of the Batman in DC's animated film Flashpoint Paradox. This is the other main Batman fight sequence from the film, and it is incredibly different from the warehouse fight scene. Not only do we have a very different kind of choreography where the main purpose is to provide the flashiest moves, it also takes place in one take and is an apocalyptic dream sequence, resulting in a very peculiar yet memorable scene for the film. To round off all the fight scenes in Batman vs Superman, today we're taking a look at the final battle against Doomsday. Zack Snyder knows how to expertly stage and shoot really exhilarating action sequences, and this one is no exception. While light on the fighting choreography, the action is very slickly presented. One of his most used camera techniques, and one which several directors such as J.J. Abrams have used, is doing a quick zoom in on the action, also known as a crash zoom, just as if it were being shot with a real camera. While this technique was rampant in the 70s, it really died out during modern film and has made a resurgence with practically every big CG action scene, as by simulating a camera movement, it makes the shot seem more real, and this one is no exception. He uses it multiple times and usually to great effect. It can highlight an impact or draw attention to a moment. Before Doomsday is ignited into full power, everything everything is cast with a deep shade of blue, but once things get intense, everything is brimming with orange. The camera is very mobile and follows the action to a T, eliminating the need for rapid cutting. For example, this sequence starts off with a medium of Superman, which quickly turns into a close-up of his laser vision. We then swoop around for an over-the-shoulder shot of Superman using the blast against Doomsday to only pull back for a wide where we can see our two fighters engaged in a Kamehameha energy battle. Instead of breaking up that sequence into a series of 4 separate shots, we get them all in one swooping majestic shot. Such is the beauty of using CG in your fights. You could place the camera wherever you'd like. Snyder, as is well known, is a huge fan of using slow motion, but here we mostly get that effect to show off Wonder Woman looking awesome. The editing is perfectly paced, as although the choreography in certain shots may be a little quick, you're never lost and there's a really good flow to the fight. It's a bit of a drag to suddenly cut to Lois Lane and Peril in certain sequences, but it was necessary in order to contrive the need for Superman to hold the spear and set up his death. But I digress a bit. In sum, both the cinematography and the editing in this sequence are top notch. I elaborated on this when I did the breakdown of Batman vs Superman, but just in case you haven't seen that episode, this fight is full of what I call presentation fighting. In other words, most of the fight is either a series of tackles, single punches, or throws without any complex choreography. That being said, it's still pretty cool to watch. Superman begins the bout against Doomsday by defending Luthor and throwing a solid right hook on the monster. He is then grabbed, punched, and flies against the structure, which collapses. He recuperates, launches a classic Superman 2-punch, but is grabbed and thrown against the structure, which collapses. Superman then recuperates a bit, Doomsday grabs him, then throws him against another structure, which collapses. Begin to notice a pattern? I must say that after the beautifully visceral combat for Man of Steel, it was kind of disappointing to watch such an underwhelming bout with two supremely overpowered individuals. After the military learns that bullets aren't going to stop Doomsday, Superman decides to fight him in space. But unlike in the animated version where the world knows that Superman is on their side and lets him fly off into space in order to pull off an epic tackle that results in a crater, in this DC universe the president nukes at the drop of a hat and Superman is left dangling in space until Wonder Woman shows up to cue the Trinity shot. Batman is a master martial artist, as he extensively demonstrated in the warehouse scene, but against superpowered beings that can resist nuclear explosions, he can't really do that much. So his first order of business is to duck and cover from Doomsday's energy blast. Wonder Woman deflects the blast and Superman takes it like a champ. Now we finally get into some close quarters combat as Miss Prince leaps into battle, deflects some debris, and slices at Doomsday's foot but misses. Superman then quickly swoops in to give him a death stare. Taking advantage of Doomsday's captivation with Superman, Wonder Woman burns Mr. Day's calf with her shield, setting up Superman's tackle. Wonder Woman once again tries to go in for an epic leap attack, and misses when Doomsday dodges at the last moment. After devastatingly effective left straight punch, Wonder Woman goes in for the left calf once again, this time slicing it with her sword. A car is no match for a legendary shield, and Doomsday then grabs Superman to launch it to an epic combo resulting in... no, just kidding, he just throws him for the umpteenth time. But he does set up an awesome flying knee kick, something I never imagined a giant creature from space would do. Batman watches in awe as Doomsday punches Wonder Woman with immense power, following up with an energy attack which is easily deflected. Now we go into an epic energy attack battle straight out of Dragon Ball Z as both our attackers are trying to overpower each other. Doomsday wins, but Superman can't continue to fight as his selective super hearing cues into Lois Lane. The monster remembers Batman is among the living, but luckily the Dark Knight has his grappling gun to avoid his energy blasts. Using the same lead grenade he used against Superman, Doomsday is unable to find him in the debris. Wonder Woman refuses to accept the frontal attacks don't work on Doomsday and gets punched in the face once again, but the Amazonian princess is one very tough woman and shrugs off the attack with a smile. She blocks the monster's hammer fist with her sword and counters it by slicing his hand off, which unfortunately grows back in seconds. She lassos a monster, Batman uses his remaining kryptonite grenade on him, and Superman goes in for the kill, sacrificing himself in the process. It's the final battle. The Trinity must unite to take down the ultimate threat. It's a really neat concept, but as it's been elaborated on in multiple videos and essays and podcasts from several authors around the world, it was terribly rushed. This is Superman's most powerful villain and one of his most legendary story arcs, and they decided to cram it in the last 40 minutes of the movie. Also, it was particularly contrived to have Superman throw the spear, since Wonder Woman would have easily gotten it, or as how it should have ended epically demonstrated, Batman himself could have thrown the spear without the need for Superman to die. If they wanted to do the death of Superman's story arc, they should have done that arc. His death not only comes off as very contrived, but doesn't really mean that much since he appeared so little throughout the film. The Ultimate Cut rectifies some of this as you spend more time with Clark Kent, but if you want a character to heroically sacrifice himself, you need to set it up so there was literally no other possible way to prevent prevent that situation. And as it's been elaborated on, there were dozens of other options in this particular situation where Superman did not have to sacrifice himself. It's an unfortunate effect of trying to cram so many plot points into one film and seeing the film as only a part of a larger puzzle instead of its own individual awesome piece. Superman needed to die so they could justify a reason for Suicide Squad to exist and give Batman more importance in Justice League. But that sort of thinking is terribly pragmatic and hurts the quality of the individual films, as Marvel learned the hard way when they shoehorned an insane amount of expositional dialogue and scenes into Iron Man 2. What we have here is an expertly done action sequence. Perhaps the choreography in parts can be underwhelming and the setup for the fight as well as the outcome may have been contrived, but what cannot be argued is that it's a very exciting, well shot and edited sequence overall, and it's a true joy to see DC's most famous superheroes duking it out against Doomsday on the big screen. Here's a breakdown of another great Batman fight scene from Arkham Origins. After taking out a couple of criminals from the shadows, Batman is finally drawn out by a massive explosion set by Deathstroke. A couple of batarangs fail to hit Deathstroke and he pursues him using his grappling gun. Going in for a mid-air tackle, he instead is directly hit by Deathstroke's bow staff. Since this assassin is a master of Bojutsu, the martial art of using a staff weapon, he tries to use his staff to inflict a hit on Batman several times over, but Batman deftly uses his gauntlets to deflect all such attacks. A spinning hook kick gets the job done in sending the Caped Crusader reeling, and while Deathstroke is distracted by the falling crate, Batman jumps in with a spinning drop kick. Slade Wilson then places his bow staff like an Olympic gymnast and swings back up to kick Batman off the crates. After an intensely dramatic face-off, the fight scene mainstay, Deathstroke decides to lethally injure Batman by brandishing his sword. Batman now has the task of trying to get in close to compensate for his lack of a weapon, once again utilizing his gauntlets to eventually deliver a devastating elbow. He places his arm in his neck in what looks to be a setup for a knee, but Deathstroke quickly deflects it, following up with several strikes which fail to injure Batman. Eventually, Mr. Wayne finds the perfect moment to crack the sword in half, following up with an elbow which is blocked and a hammer fist which slightly disorients Deathstroke. He then grabs the Merc's left arm and punches him right in the abdominal obliques. A quick hook is dodged as well as a sword slash, but Deathstroke gains the upper hand after a headbutt. Luckily, Batman is able to flip out of the chokehold. A third party shoots Wilson's other sword, and using the distraction, Batman fires his grappling hook to brutally clothesline him. And now we get to see our first roundhouse kick in Fight Scene Breakdown. The roundhouse kick is one of the most useful and most widely used kicks in Taekwondo, taking very little time to execute and able to inflict a good amount of damage. In this case, he uses the kick to disarm Wilson's sidearm and, not missing a beat, goes in for a spinning side kick. As Deadshot takes aim at a hanging crate, Batman slams the mercenary on the ground but is quickly knocked back by a kick. The crate falls down, ending the fight. What's unique about this fight is that despite being animated, it is presented in the same way as if it were live action. It's quickly cut, but not enough to be disorienting, staying just long enough on a shot to convey what it wants to, such as this sequence where Batman takes a hit, falls down, and then we tilt upwards to see the imminent danger. A large part of the fight is also backlit, giving a cool silhouetted look to several of the exchanges. I thought it was also a neat touch to show the footwork, as they are each nimbly stepping to avoid falling off the crates. The scene is also a fan of using slow motion to accentuate cool moments such as Batman about to collide with Deathstroke or kicking him off the crate, and also enjoys using an overhead angle to show off certain parts of the choreography. Basing oneself purely off the trailer, you can tell Deathstroke is goading Batman into a fight, and with Deadshot's appearance, you find out somebody has put a bounty on Batman's head. Batman clearly has a reason to fight, and this time he's fighting for his life, as these villains have no intent of holding back. What we have here is a spectacular fight between Batman and one of his most skilled enemies in hand-to-hand combat, resulting in a highly choreographed, slickly presented fighting cutscene that ranks up there among the best animated fights. Today we're taking a look at the fight sequence from The Dark Knight Rises where Batman rescues Blake. Let's begin. Blake quickly disarms the soldier, pointing his gun at him once he is distracted, and now we get to see how Batman deals with 6 attackers. His first move is to incapacitate the opponent nearest to him with a strong double punch, an attack which is not terribly practical but looks cool. The next guy does have a gun with him, but luckily decides to raise it in a manner which gives Batman enough time to execute a light push kick with the intent of stopping the arm. He follows up with a right hook to the head, sending him to the floor. What's also funny about this moment is that Batman must be strong with the force, as this kick somehow makes this guy fly backwards. Moving on, Batman swiftly grabs the pointed gun as the attacker got too close, and after putting him in a strong lock, the gun harmlessly goes off. He swings the gunman around, eventually landing an elbow on the man who had previously been struck down by the force, and follows up with a backhanded punch. He finally tosses the arm-locked guy and with a quick front kick to the chest, downs a man coming at him with a crowbar. Arm-locked guy comes back for seconds but is swiftly clocked with a right hook. The man in the distance finally gets up and Batman then does something to take him out while Blake watches in astonishment. Armlock guy looks up one more time, but Batman is not having any of it. What I enjoyed about this fight scene is that it's essentially one take. Yes, we keep cutting back to Blake looking in awe, but the rest of the scene plays out in a wide with no inserts whatsoever. This is a far cry from the frenetically cut and shot fight scene from Batman Begins where you couldn't make out what was going on. The low-key lighting makes Batman's suit look awesome as well. However, the risky thing about having a fight scene play out in a wide is that the choreography is completely exposed, and if it's not picture perfect, there will always be a couple of odd moments. For example, you could tell this guy was just waiting to launch his gun forward, and this guy fell on the ground for no reason. And I think cutting away to Blake's reaction for the penultimate soldier was a little lazy. I would have liked to have seen what Batman did to take that guy out. Once again though, I prefer a cohesive fight scene with small blunders than an incoherent mess of a fight scene. This is a rescue scene, just like in Batman vs Superman. If Batman hadn't interfered, Blake would have died. The fight is also immensely satisfying from a story perspective since we finally get to see Batman in action after being put out of commission from Bane's devastating knee. This is a simple yet effective fight sequence. The one take worked well for this particular encounter, if only to show how quickly Batman can breeze through a couple of attackers. What did you guys think of the fight? Which fight would you like me to analyze next? Subscribe and you can follow me on my Twitter, Instagram, and brand new Facebook fan page, Godzillarex. See you next time.